this and hand the floor over. And Tyler and Ashley, thank you guys so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and give the floor over to Amelia, who will be moderating our conversation.
Hello, so I'm Amelia, and so to start things off, could you tell us a little about yourself and what you do?
Sure, go for it, Ashley.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you guys for having me. It's great to virtually see everyone and to be on this with my good friend Ann Tyler. I'm Ashli Watts. I am president and CEO of the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, which is the state's largest business association. And I live here in Frankfort with my husband, Ryan, and my 2 children.
And I'm Ann Tyler Morgan. I'm a partner at McBrayer Law Firm in Lexington. I live here in downtown Lexington, very involved in city government, and I practice in the areas of regulatory, healthcare law, and campaign finance and election law.
And can you tell us what your favorite part about your career is?
Yeah, I have a lot of favorite parts of my career, honestly, and mine and Ashley's are probably somewhat similar. We both love being out and about, and so I love the ability of lawyers to be involved in their communities. I grew up in a small town nearby, Lawrenceburg, right next to Frankfort. And when I was growing up, lawyers were the people in the community who were real leaders. Lawyers were always out and about supporting community events and local fairs and anything anybody was doing. You always saw a lot of support and leadership among the legal community. And so that's really my favorite part of the job, is being able to be that here in Lexington and around Central Kentucky.
And Tyler's right. I think we have similar personalities, which is why we're such good friends. But I love to be out and about. And I think being a chamber president, that's kind of in your job description. So every day I'm meeting with new and different and interesting people. We work a lot at the Capitol here in Frankfort with all the legislators and the governor's office and all the different policy makers. And so growing up, I was always kind of a little bit of a political junkie. I love to follow politics. And this job has led me to be able to do some important work at the Capitol with the legislature and the governor's office as well. But we also have a great working relationship here at the chamber with almost 80 local chambers of commerce all across the state. So you all may know your local chamber of commerce in your city or your county. And so that's one of my favorite parts of the job, is meeting people from all over Kentucky. And we're hopefully getting back to traveling a little bit more. The last couple of years, we've been a little bit still meeting via Zoom and that way. But I love being out and about in Kentucky and meeting with different community leaders and just having something new every single day. That's my favorite part, is really, this is not a desk job. My job is kind of to be out and about. And so I love that.
So those both seem like very active careers. So when you need like a break from work, what would you say your favorite vacation destination is?
Ashley, I know you have a very favorite, so you go ahead.
Well, I hope I'm going to say what you think. So, and Tyler and I also travel a bit together. So we've traveled to a lot of really fun places. And Katie just put today as National Plan a Vacation Day. So I will have to get on that this evening. I love the beach. The beach is kind of my place where I feel like I can go and relax and take a deep breath. I am pretty high energy and I'm on the go quite a bit. And so it takes a lot for me to kind of calm down and relax a little bit. But I feel like I do that really well at the beach. And so I usually try to plan at least 1 or 2 beach vacations a year. My kids like the beach. They like the pool a little bit more, but hopefully I'll get them to be beach bums someday. But definitely the beach for me is probably my favorite place to travel.
Yeah, mine is Ireland, actually. I was lucky enough to study twice in Ireland, lived there at one point on my own. And so I have a real sweet spot in my heart for the people of Ireland, keep a lot of friends there. And it's definitely a second home for me. The toughest part of the pandemic has definitely been not being able to be back in Ireland. That's the other place I like to spend my time.
And
what about you, Amelia? Where's your favorite place to visit?
I also like going to the beach. It is a very relaxing place. Though, honestly, anywhere where there's a lot of things you can do outdoors, with hiking and biking and whatnot, I enjoy going.
And we're lucky here in Kentucky. We've got plenty of outdoor space for hiking and biking. That's awesome.
There is. But when you can't get away from work, maybe to like go to the beach or across the country, self-care is still something that's very important, especially during these times. So what are ways that you implement self-care?
Yeah, I love this question, Amelia. I'm a really big advocate of a lot of different practices that I've incorporated to make sure I stay calm. As people can probably expect, lawyers don't always stay calm. We're known to fight for a living. It's not real fighting, but it can certainly get a bit heated. So I think it's really important to slow the pace and stay mindful. So in terms of self-care practices, I journal a lot. I meditate. I use a lot of online resources. I think we're so lucky now that there are a lot of apps and websites and YouTube videos to help you kind of slow down, calm down, and really kind of tune in with yourself. Church is really helpful for me in that way as well. And so I definitely believe in taking care of yourself when you lead an active life.
I agree. And I think it's a great question too, Amelia, because I think when I was growing up, we probably didn't place the importance on self-care. It was more about go, go, go and earn your way to the top. And, I don't think there was quite the importance placed on it. So it's really great that we're talking about it and we're talking about self-care and mental health, especially after the last couple of years. I think for me, I really do kind of draw energy from being around people. Some people need to kind of go away from people and be by themselves a little bit to kind of feel refreshed. My husband's very much like that. I really get my energy and kind of feel refreshed and re-energized by being around people. And so I think going out with my girlfriends, whether that's to dinner or on a vacation or watching a movie or just getting together to talk, that really does that's one of the ways that I think I practice self-care that may not be the typical way. But I also like, every once in a while to calm down. I like to read quite a bit, especially the last couple of years. I've had a lot more time to read. So I've been reading a lot of books lately. And then every day I try to at least walk a couple miles and I'll put on a podcast. And there's plenty obviously to go around these days and kind of just not think about everything going on at work or at home or, with my kids' school or whatever it could be. And I'll listen to podcasts and just kind of walk and get refreshed. So those are some of the ways that I kind of like to do a little bit of self-care.
Yeah, I'm a big podcast walker too. Amelia, you listen to any podcasts when you're exercising and outside?
I usually listen to music, but what type of podcasts do you listen to?
I listen to a whole lot of stuff. I have a lot of authors that I like to listen to who are kind of fun and good at the banter. So I like a lot of current events. I listen to something, and Ashli might as well, called Pantsuit Politics. Not very regularly, but I'll kind of just dabble. I listen to a lot of kind of motivational productivity type of stuff. So it's across the board. I really can't pinpoint one genre of podcast, but I would say I listen to a lot and I listen frequently.
I always kind of almost get embarrassed sometimes when I get asked this question because I feel like I do a lot of serious stuff at work and I'm involved in politics and policy. And honestly, when I listen to podcasts, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be about true crime. My husband jokes that's pretty much all I ever watch or listen to, but true crime is kind of my go-to podcast genre.
And where would we find you on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m.?
My answer is going to be doing whatever I want. 6 days of the week. I'm a very regimented person. I wake up at 4:30 and I go straight to the gym on weekdays. On Sunday mornings, I sing at my church. So on Saturday morning, I am a free bird. I think it's really important that everybody at least have some time that's not scheduled, that's not regimented. So in the summer, I'll frequently walk down to the farmer's market. It's right down the street from me. I may go to the gym if I'm in the mood for it. I may go to my favorite bakery. I live in a neighborhood that I like to call Donut Triangle. It's between multiple bakeries. So you can often find me on a Saturday morning indulging at one of those. What about you, Ashli?
Yeah, Saturdays are kind of the same for me. So we, usually it'd be shuffling or shuttling kids around to whatever activity they have of the day. My daughter is involved in dance, and my son's in Boy Scouts and other things. So I feel like a lot of times on Saturday we're shuttling them around. But Saturdays are kind of just a free day too, to be able to do the things that I wasn't able to do during the week. But like Ann Tyler, we live right down the street from a farmer's market, and so usually if the weather's nice, we will walk down to the farmer's market. I live right in downtown Frankfurt on Saturday mornings and see, all the neighbors out and about. So pretty much just a relaxing day, but we tend to be on the go a little bit just because my kids are 6 and 9 and they are on the go quite a bit these days.
I can't really relate to like having to shuttle people around, but I do know how it feels to be like taken a lot of places.
Shuttled around. Yeah, exactly.
And this can be hard when you have like, I guess, busier careers, but how do you balance your career, personal life, and passions?
Ashli and I talk about this a lot. We're both big believers in balancing every part of our lives. And I think it makes us both more effective at what we do. So I'll piggyback on what Ashli said earlier. We both really value the importance of making time for your friends. It's something that we both take a lot of initiative in, is making sure you have plans with friends and you're connecting with people and keeping in touch. So that's something that's always important to me, and I schedule it in just like work. It's something that if I haven't heard from somebody in a little while, I'll email myself a reminder, text that person, see how they're doing, see if you can set up a call or a lunch. So I try to do a lot of that. Those self-care practices that we mentioned earlier, those are really built into my day. So the balance is there. It's kind of a structured habit for me. Exercise is a habit for me. So, what I have found is the key to keeping balance is to really kind of not to make it like a chore, but to really be considerate and thoughtful each week and each day about kind of how your time is being allocated and the things you need to do. So to get really specific, because I like this practice, on Sundays, I take a little bit of time and I map out kind of the areas of life: career, friends, self-care, physical, and I'll just jot the things that are priorities for me that week. And it may be as simple as drinking more water. It may be as simple as, you're going to see a friend on Wednesday and you're looking forward to it. But I try to be really thoughtful about how I spend my time.
Yeah, and I think very practically speaking, like my calendar, if it's not scheduled, sometimes it doesn't exist in my world. And I don't know if you've heard the saying. I think it says something like you can't pour from an empty cup. And so really, if you can't kind of fill yourself up and take care of yourself, you're not going to be your best in other areas of your life, whether that's work or your family or your friendships or your church or whatever it may be. And so I do think, like Ann Tyler said, scheduling and making sure that you take time for yourself and for your family or church or activities, whatever it is, because I think a lot of times, I know in the last couple of years, the work-life balance, I always say, is kind of gone. I kind of call it at this point work-life integration, because during the workday, we all kind of know we work almost around the clock a lot of times. And so your work life is so blended with your personal life, especially for those of us who've had children doing school at home when you're working. It's all just kind of mushed together. And so I think it's just making sure that you're taking time for each parts of those lives that you want to take care of and nurture. And so for me, it's a big scheduling thing, and scheduling dinners or scheduling church or my kids' activities, or like you said, today's National Plan a Vacation Day, planning a vacation and making sure that you're really kind of trying to unplug when you're on vacation and you're not being inundated with whatever's going on back at home or work. So for me, very practically, it's scheduling.
And more for a professional aspect, I guess, what does leadership mean to you, and what is your leadership style?
Ashli, you want to go first on
Oh, okay. I'll take the hard one. Leadership to me, I really think is being an example. Leadership is, I always say, I would never ask any of my staff here at the chamber to do something I wouldn't do or that I haven't done. It's leading by example, being a positive reinforcement. I think being a good listener And what I've realized a lot in the last couple of years is that everyone kind of needs led in a little bit of a different way. Everyone needs something a little different from the leader in their life. And so being able to kind of adapt to whatever that person needs at that time. And sometimes people need a little bit more hand holding than others at certain times. But I think being a good listener and being respectful, treating them the way that you would want to be treated, I think that's really important. You may be a little too young, Amelia, to have had maybe a bad boss that's maybe not so nice to you, but I think most of us have probably had one. And so learning from those examples of really treating someone with kindness and respect. And I think having high expectations for them, because if you don't, they're not going to succeed at their full potential. So for me, that's kind of what I've learned, especially over the last couple of years when leadership has been a little bit different because a lot of us have been remote.
Yeah, that's great. I would echo so much of that. And I would say that the driving force for me, the forces would always be service and sincerity. If I can always keep in mind who I'm trying to serve, which is multifaceted, it's clients, it's community, it's my firm, it's a lot of people in my life, frankly, that, and really the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Ashli and I are both kind of public policy creatures, and we both serve a lot of constituencies here across the state. So thinking about that act of service. And I think in terms of leading on the job, being sincere with people, Ashli mentioned both listening and being kind, but also having high expectations. And I think as long as you're honest and authentic, you can be kind, but sometimes give a little push, sometimes be quite honest in the expectations of folks. And when maybe they need a little more work in certain areas, and you just deliver it the way you would want it to be delivered to you with frankness and kindness, and always thinking about serving their ultimate growth. So working with younger lawyers, for example, I'm always thinking about how they can become better lawyers, become better community leaders themselves. And that's not always going to be perfect. The execution of that is tough and very unique to the individual, as Ashli said. But I think keeping those two things in mind is really key for me.
You both mentioned the importance of being a good listener. Can you say more about how you would do this?
Well, it's a work in progress. Ashli and I are talkers.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's not an easy thing for some of us. We've had to learn over the years.
I am literally, there's a voice in my head that tells me, you don't need to talk right now. And that voice becomes louder the older I get. This is something that, I hope continues to come with more age, is that it becomes easier to recognize that you learn a lot more when you're not the one talking. You already know what you know. And so you don't always have to get your point out there. But really taking in more than what people are saying. People tell you a lot through their body language. They tell you a lot through just the way they're interacting with you or how they're getting in touch with you. So really being able to take all those cues from people, I think is really important in the listening process, and always trying to come across to people with the energy of non-judgment and real acceptance of whatever someone's trying to communicate with you, because we all bring in our own biases to conversations. But the more you can kind of quiet those biases and say, whatever they're trying to communicate to me, I'm going to take that in fully, rather than go ahead and try to assume what's being said. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I really try to approach things with an open mind, and to remind myself, literally, mentally, let's see what another person has to say. You don't need to talk right now.
I do as well. And for some of us that are talkers, I always say I've really never gotten in trouble in my life except for talking too much in school. So my daughter has the same thing happen to her, and I tell her she'll be fine, but we do need to probably learn how to listen a little bit better. And so for me, I've honestly had to practice almost like active listening, to really kind of think of things when you're listening to someone that you can pinpoint and follow up with. And so if I'm speaking to one of my staff members, maybe I'll remember something they said, and then a couple days later, shoot them an email about it and say, I remember you told me this. I saw this article that you might like, or you said you like true crime podcasts. I have a great one, you should listen to. So I've tried to practice some active listening, to really make that person know they are being heard.
Yeah.
what quality do you think makes a great leader?
When I think of a leader, I think of somebody who's pretty selfless. When I think of the leaders in my life and the amount of time that they've given me, that they could have, in the legal world, we work on a billable hour system, and we bill, this is kind of funny, by the 6-minute increment. So we enter every single thing we do in a billing system by the 0.1 or the 0.2, and that's how we charge our clients, and they pay us for our services for them. And so it's really easy to get in the mindset of your time is only worthwhile if it's being paid for, because you're doing this all day, every day by the 6-minute increment for years at a time. And the best leaders I know are the ones who never made me feel like I was being rushed with the lessons they were imparting to me. I'm going to reference the founder of my law firm, Terry McBrayer, because in my life, he was just the ultimate leader. Everybody knew him. Everybody felt like they were his best friend. He took the same amount of time, regardless of the level at which you were working within the firm, or if you were just somebody on the street. He was happy to stop and spend his time on you. And that's the biggest gift I think you can give somebody is the gift of time in a way that doesn't make them feel that you're counting the minutes.
Yeah, I think Ann Tyler is exactly right. I was kind of jotting a couple things down because I always like this question, because I just pull from personal experiences and leaders that I've really looked up to or mentors. I think integrity and trust is a big one. Trust, I think, is the basis of basically any kind of good leader. You want to be able to trust them. I often think that being a good leader is also having vision. You have a vision, a bigger picture idea, and that, you have that trust that they're going to lead you in the right direction. And then one thing I think about my predecessor here at the chamber, who was a mentor of mine. I worked with him for many years before I took over and he retired. And I often thought about when we were in that transition process that he was the type of leader that encouraged me and helped me do things that I would not have thought I would be able to do. And so looking back, I realized that that's the kind of leader I would want to be, that, you're helping people do things they never thought they would be able to do. So to me, those are some good examples of just leadership that I've seen in my personal life.
And you mentioned vision. So as a leader, how would you, I guess, realize this vision?
So vision for me, and I think about it quite a bit because I lead the chamber here, and we do really important work, and we have about 50 employees, and you can kind of get your head down on the day-to-day operations of making sure that the building's clean and that your budget's being made and that your hiring process is good. But really, my job as the leader is to have a bigger vision for the chamber. What big projects are we going to take on? What big policy initiative are we going to do? And so I think a lot of times in many organizations, the leader is really responsible for the big picture vision of where do you want this organization or this business to be? And I think that's one thing that I really want to try to be a leader here at the chamber and really across the state, is to have a bigger vision as part of my leadership style.
Yeah, I do. I've already talked about journaling and kind of mapping out my week. I do that for everything. I'm a big vision maker on paper. So I tend to do that for the year, for the month, for the week, for the day. I do it every day. Kind of what are my top priorities? And I follow a podcaster that maybe Ashley's heard of, maybe some of you, called Marie Forleo, who has some really good ideas about productivity and how to goal set. She always talks about naming 3 primary goals, because it's very easy, I think, when you're busy, and leaders often are, to get really scattered in your priorities and what you want to accomplish. Because like Ashli said, operationally, there's just a lot going on day to day. So it's really easy to lose focus on that big picture. And the easiest way for me to come back to that big picture is to point out, okay, narrow it down. What are the 3 things that over this year, over this month, are kind of important themes for me? Maybe there's a work goal, maybe there's a personal goal, maybe there are a couple of one of those 2 categories, but I try to feel out those few things. And when I'm in doubt about where to spend my time or where to spend staff resources, whatever the expenditure is for those goals, always bring it back to, is it serving one of those. And, again, a lot of times one of those for me is community and friendship. So spending time there feeds into one of those. But that's how I envision things. I do it very, very visually on paper.
And how important is it to have a mentor to grow as a leader? And what are some steps to build that type of relationship?
I think it's really important to have a mentor. And in fact, right before this webinar, I'm going through kind of a work accreditation thing, and I had to have some mentors help me through the process. So I actually emailed 3 different people to see if they would be my mentors in this process and kind of help me along as I go through it. And so I can look back at various points in my life, and I have different mentors, whether that's, growing up in high school or at church, in college, and various jobs. And I think having a mentor is really important, just to be able to kind of learn from them, pick their brain, kind of see the path they follow to see if you want to follow something similar. But for me, I can really look back in my life and see that certain people that have been mentors have made a really big impact and have really helped me get to where I am today. And I think, practically speaking, you said, how do you kind of get there? That's always the question, is do mentors just kind of appear? Is it just kind of a natural thing where you kind of find someone older who's been where you are, where you want to be? And it can be that. I think that was probably what happened with me with my predecessor who had the job before I did. I just got hired here, and throughout the years, I think he very much became my mentor. But then today, like I said, for this work project, I had to have a couple people who had gone through it already. And I just emailed them and said, hey, I'm going through this process. I see that you have done it and we all know each other. Would you be my mentor? Hopefully it won't take too much time, but it'd be great if you have some time where I can pick your brain and ask you questions. So I think sometimes just asking and kind of making that relationship is really the first step.
Yeah, I made a big face there at the beginning because I just have so many mentors. I consider a lot of my closest friends, Ashli included, mentors in various ways. And I'll expand on that idea a little bit, because I think Ashli really eloquently talked about kind of the traditional mentor, which she and I have both enjoyed over the years. And I think that there are many mentors depending on kind of the area of life. You have mentors who you really admire in your work life, and certain mentors that you really admire in your community life, and certainly in your personal as well. But I also think that it's really important to kind of have a tribe, people who are your peers that also mentor you and can hold you accountable to your goals, not in a strict way, but in a really encouraging and cheerleader kind of way, to help you think about things in ways that you haven't thought about them before, because you're kind of on the same track and you're doing a lot of the same things, but you're living different lives day to day, and you can contribute a lot to each other's experience in that way. So I think it's really important to have good leaders in your life and to really look up to them. And then I think it's also really important to surround yourself with people that, while your peers, you consider to be people you really admire and want to continue to emulate in your own life.
And we have a question from a viewer, and it is, you both are very intentional with your personal, professional, social, and family lives. How can we learn to use intention to be our best selves? Basically, how do we start?
That's a great question. I think it's really important. So I would take this in steps. The first step is to really know thyself. That's something that takes forever. So we'll be learning ourselves for years to come. But to think kind of back to, at your core, who are you? What do you like to do? What's important to you? If you had one day to spend however you would want to spend it, what would your choices be? What do you think is your mission? What speaks to you? What do you care about? Do you care about animals? Do you care about the arts? Ashli's daughter, like she said, is very interested in dance and the theater, and it's important to her to entertain and to give back to people in that way. And you can see that, and have been able to see that since she was really little. So I think it's important to think kind of, who are we at our cores, because that's really what helps us think about what we care about and where we want to spend our resources. And then when I'm thinking about my intentions, again, I break it down into kind of goals for a period of time. I think it's really important to reflect on that often because they can change. Our lives change. Things come in, they shift, opportunities arise that we can follow. And so being very consistent with the intention setting, I think is important, and not saying, well, I set an intention 10 years ago and I haven't thought about it since. Maybe the 10-year reference is a little irrelevant in this setting, but just thinking, oh, what I said a couple of years ago still holds may not be true, because a lot can change in our lives over time. So thinking really critically on a regular basis about who am I and what's important to me and what can I do to make more of that happen in my life. And also staying really positive with it. I think part of being intentional is being positive and optimistic about being able to do what we need to do in the world.
I completely agree. And I think to kind of further on that too, I know for me, I keep going back to this because this is not my natural state. I kind of have to make myself do it, but to be scheduled in it. So if you have things that you are really intentionally wanting to do and you want to practice whatever craft it is, or take more time to read books, or to volunteer, or to go to your church, or spend more time with your friends, or visit people that you haven't visited in a while, scheduling that just like we would schedule anything work-wise or school-wise, I think is really important. And so I think putting it on that calendar and making it the same priority as other parts of your life has really helped me.
Yeah.
Okay, and to give advice to those who are watching this, what tricks have you discovered to keep you focused and productive in your day-to-day busy schedule?
Yeah, I've had to work at this in different scenarios because, like we talked about, I tend to go back and forth between a desk and being out and about. And you can lose some time shifting between being really public and really talkative and active, and then coming back to a desk and really needing to crunch numbers on something. I don't really crunch numbers, I'll be honest, but write a legal brief or whatever it is you're doing and be really quiet and really focused. So to do that, Ashli's talked a lot about schedule. I'll emphasize that as well. I'm a really intentional time blocker. So what that means is I take my Outlook calendar and every 15 minutes of the day is scheduled. And that may be big blocks of, write such and such. A couple of tricks that are helpful for me is to break those tasks up. Don't have a big block where it's look at this and then read this and then research that and then write that. Instead, you'll have a 30-minute block that says skim over such and such, or an hour block that says write that contract, and make it kind of an action-oriented verb. And that way, when I look at my calendar, that hour can't end without that task having been completed, or often because you'll get phone calls and the day will change. It means I can't go to bed until those tasks have been completed, which has a really effective way of keeping me on task, because I like to go to bed on time. So I want to make sure those things have been accomplished.
I completely agree. I'm a big list maker. I love to cross things off of a list. And so you'll find me usually in the mornings I have one right here, a little list that I have that I'll cross off of when I have to get things done. So lists, the calendar, and making sure that, I joke, my husband, I send him calendar invites a lot just for random things, that it's on both of our calendars. It can't be confused who's going to pick up the kids or when vacation is. So I often say, I don't know how people really functioned before iPhones or smartphones, because I think that's kind of holding everything together in my world. I often say if it's not on my phone, whether in email or a calendar or text, it doesn't exist in my mind. So luckily technology, I think, has helped me quite a bit stay really kind of focused, where that's not usual, my typical tendency. I feel like I work pretty well in kind of scattered environments or fast-paced environments, but sometimes it's not the most organized environment. So technology has helped me be a lot more organized.
Yeah, music can help with that too. I'm the same. I work really well in really high-paced, frantic environments like the legislature. So when I have to sit and do something for a long period of time, I usually require some kind of white noise, like music in the background.
How do you admire someone else's success without doubting your own self-worth?
I'm going to give the biggest example of this yesterday because I think it just speaks to, female friendship and female leadership, really, I was appearing on a public television show that Ashli and I are both on regularly. And first thing in the morning, I had a text from Ashli. I had an email from Ashli saying, what would be helpful to you? Here are multiple things that I've worked on that I think you might want to mention that would be helpful. And I just thought in that moment, here are two women who both do this thing, and without being prompted, without being asked, she was just 100% there to support me in that. And there are so many examples of that. I think anytime we feel kind of threatened or, self-doubtful in those moments, we have to take a step back and recognize that a rising tide raises all ships. The more cool stuff we do, the more cool people we're going to know. And so we're always going to see examples around us of people doing things that are really great. And that's amazing because it means we're doing something right. We are surrounding ourselves with people who are driven and kind and giving back to their communities. And the more we see of that, the more we're doing of that too. So it's always an example of more to come for us, and being supportive of another person only raises your own abilities, raises your own opportunities. So I think anytime we doubt ourselves in those moments or compare ourselves, it's so easy with social media, which I've pretty much gotten rid of for that reason, because I think it breeds something that makes us think that there's not enough to go around. And I can assure you, there's always more than enough to go around.
I agree. And, I've always kind of been a girl's girl. I always have a lot of girlfriends. I have different groups of girlfriends. And so I've never really seen myself in competition with other girls, which is nice. But I've always kind of cheered on all of my friends' success and have helped them. And they have done the same for me. And so sometimes when I hear, women can be other women's worst enemy, or that, you're not getting quite the friendship from one of your friends, if something good's happening to you and they're maybe not as happy for you as they should be, it's always weird in my mind because I just really don't understand it. I just think that I've been supported by women my whole life, and I've kind of seen what happens when you can, and you will remember those women throughout your whole life and throughout your career. I can still tell you women that have helped me along as I've kind of grown in my career. And I often say, you need to build as you rise. And so I'm really cognizant of this. I'm the first female president of the state chamber, and other women have really helped me get to this point. And so I make sure with other younger women that are kind of rising through the ranks or have just started their careers or getting ready to go to college or whatever it may be, to really help them the way others helped me, because I think that's the only way that we women will succeed, is to really rally around each other. So I'm a big believer in girlfriends and having your tribe and having your friends around you and celebrating others' success. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
And for the final question, what do you believe will be the biggest challenge for the next generation of female leaders behind you? And what advice would you give them?
I may go back to social media. I think it's a curse and a blessing. Obviously, there's a lot of connection to be found online, and there are so many great resources to be found online. But I think it also can be a place that we just know statistically can be really damaging for young women, and creates a barrier where people can say things that are often hurtful or often unintentionally so, but they lack that real human connection. And so I think finding a balance with social media over time, Ashli and I grew up without social media. We didn't have it until we were kind of young adults. And so it's a little different for us because even though we were young when it came out, we had a choice. And any of the female leaders who come behind us will not have probably had that choice. They'll have been on social media kind of from day one or exposed to it in one way or the other. So I think stepping back to the extent possible and saying, how do I want to interact with this? And what do I want out of this experience? And how can I choose how this is incorporated into my life rather than it just being a given? I think it's going to be really important for a lot of reasons.
I completely echo that. I actually had made a note of that when I saw the questions for today. I think social media, like Ann Tyler said, it can be a great thing, and I can share pictures of my kids or my travel, and I can connect with people from high school that I haven't talked to in 20 years. But I do think a lot about like my daughter, who's almost 10, if she ever gets a social media account. And I've already heard stories in her class about them chatting on Kids Messenger and some of the not nice things that the kids have said to each other. And I just think, adolescence is hard enough as it is. Young adulthood is hard enough as it is. And we didn't have that extra pressure growing up of being able to say whatever you want behind a screen. And a lot of people have more courage behind a screen than they would to someone's face. And so that does really worry me. I can especially say that for having a daughter, that she's going to be facing that kind of moving forward. And I think kind of piggybacking off of that is the lack of civility. I think when we kind of grew up, I feel like I'm dating myself quite a bit. The world was a little bit more civil in some regards. Now, not in all regards, but in some regards, it was more civil. You wouldn't have said the things to people's faces that people are saying on social media or behind a screen, and how they're, how different children are getting buried or bullied in various ways. And so I think the lack of civility for women is that worries me. And I think a lot of it does stem from social media. So I hope we're on a good path with social media, but as a mother, especially, I do kind of worry about the influence that will have on my children, just because I've heard a lot of stories, but hopefully it can be used in a positive way. Kind of like this Zoom right now. We're connecting with people that we would have never met before. So hopefully we can kind of turn things around.
Yeah.
And actually, we have one more question from a viewer, and it is, should we ask someone to be our mentor, or do they just happen?
Yeah, like Ashli said, I'm glad to hear she reached out to people today. That's inspiring to me to hear that that we can always do that. And it's absolutely true. I don't think there's any greater gift to a person than letting them know that they have inspired you in some way, that you seek their advice. It's pretty hard to offend a person when you say, I respect you so much that I'd like for you to advise me. I've never been told no on any request like that I've made. So I think there's very little fear in making that request. Somebody may tell you that they're time limited in the amount of time they can spend on that, but most people are very flattered when you tell them that you think they have something to teach you. So I absolutely think reaching out to people is smart, and it's again a very intentional way to go about your life.
I agree. And, I get requests quite a bit for someone to shadow me for a day. And I always love it. I always feel like, I love when high schoolers especially say, I have an interest in government or in politics. And I heard about you through my parents or the Chamber of Commerce. And so can I shadow you for the day? Like Ann Tyler said, that's really flattering. I think everyone would appreciate that. So I think being intentional and just asking, and maybe it's not to be a mentor for an extended period of time. Maybe it like I just said, shadowing for a day or following you around for a couple of days or attending an event with you. And some may happen a little bit more natural, where you see someone, maybe it's a teacher or a professor. One of my professors in college was very much a mentor that kind of just naturally developed. So I think it can happen both ways, but I know it can be a little nerve-wracking sometimes just to probably email or call an adult and say, hey, can I shadow you, or would you be my mentor? But I promise you, like Ann Tyler said, they're going to be flattered. And I think they're going to give you some time, and you can learn a lot from having someone like that in your life.
Yeah, they'll probably, if they're anything like me, they'll talk your leg off. Every time I take a call like that or a visit like that, I end up just enjoying it so much that they're probably thinking, I'm sorry I asked, but I always have a great time with that.
Well, Ashli and Tyler, thank you guys so much for sharing your personal stories and your advice with us. I have a note of podcast now to go look through. And Amelia,
always
thank
make
you.
those recommendations.
Yes. And Amelia, thank you. You did such a wonderful job moderating the conversations and fielding the audience questions. So we really appreciate all of you all. And I did record this session, so we're going to post it on our YouTube page, and I'll share out the link. So if you guys have anyone that missed it, feel free to share it with them, and they can watch you all. Perfect. So thank you guys again, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you,
Amelia,
Katie. Thank you, Amelia.